Hello everyone, I welcome you to my YouTube channel Professor Civil Mandal. Here I speak about civil engineering and you will find my various video lectures regarding various topics of civil engineering over here. So let us resume our discussion related to basic concept of RCC, and this is the very first chapter of this particular course, and already this is the third part of this first chapter, and previous two parts are also there and their link is given in the description. You can check the link, and if you haven't gone through those two parts, so I would request you to first go through that two parts and then proceed for this third part of this video lesson. So previously we had discussed about, we actually started the introduction of how we deal with RCC, where we need to read the RCC or its design. Then we read about cement concrete, and we read about two different concrete mixes, the design mix and the nominal mix. Then comes the fresh concrete, where we discussed about the workability, and then we read about the hardened concrete, and there we discussed about the various strengths of the concrete. So after we have discussed about the various strength of the concrete, we came upon 2 or 3 tests, and then now we are proceeding in the third part of this video, where we will be discussing about the testing of hardened concrete, the actual testing which is done on the hardened concrete. First is the load test, and next is the core cut test. Load test is very common, and these are used in almost every labs, where we do compressive strength test mostly on the cubes. We also do the split tensile strength mostly on cylinders, and flexure test, and this is done mostly on the prism. So these are actually destructive tests, where we make certain specimen of the concrete, of the particular grade of concrete. We mix and make up the certain specimen. After certain days of curing, we apply load in all the possible ways, like the compressive stresses, like for the tensile stresses, for the flexure stresses. We try to apply all type of loads, all type of stresses, and we destroy that particular specimen. So after we destroy the particular specimen, we get an idea up to how much load that particular specimen can take. So when we are applying compression, it comes as the compressive strength test. When we are applying the split tensile, or we are applying the tensile strength on the particular specimen, and it is done by splitting a cylindrical specimen, so it is known as the split tensile strength or strength test, or also sometimes it is called as the cylinder split test. And also finally we also have the flexure test, where we test for the maximum flexure a particular beam or a particular prism can take. So it is done mostly on the prisms. So these are three tests, three load tests, where we put some load and we thus get about the maximum load a particular specimen can take, and these are done in this particular 3 ways. Next is the core cut test, and this is used commercially in the field, and it is used for road construction. Just for your knowledge, keep it in mind that core cut test is used for the road construction. Next we come to the non-destructive test, where we don't need to destroy that particular specimen, or suppose it is mostly used in practical scenario or real life scenario. Like suppose a beam is constructed and it is there for several years. So now if you being a quality engineer, so if you are asked to check what is the current situation or current quality of that particular beam, which has been there for serving there for many number of years, you cannot directly go and keep on destroying it and try to get the load, how much load it can take. So that is quite impossible. You cannot break a beam which is already there. So for that type of things, that type of scenarios, we use some other techniques, where we actually did not to destroy that particular specimen or that particular element, and we will get the load what is there. So for this we use two things. One is the rebound hammer, and next is the ultrasonic pulse velocity. So in the rebound hammer, you can see this one hammer like thing is there, and this is the diagram of that particular thing, and there's a plunger, and this plunger is actually pressed against that particular concrete wall or slab or particular beam or even the specimen which we use in our lab to conduct various tests. So we can just push the plunger over it, and this plunger will be rebounded with some amount of energy. That a spring, you know about spring energy, the restoring force of a spring, the energy that will be stored inside a spring, and how much energy will be given to rebound that particular plunger, and that rebound will be actually taken place in the spring. So that amount of energy is thus used to calibrate our observations to know what is the compressive strength of that particular specimen. So let's read about this particular topic, that is the rebound hammer test. The energy rebounded by the rebound hammer after being pressed into the testing sample gives idea about the concrete strength. So there will be certain amount of energy which will be rebounded back, because there's some spring is there attached to this particular plunger, and there's one hammer which further hits this latch, and thus we get some reading in this particular indicator. So this rebound energy will thus give us the idea about the concrete strength, that how much concrete strength is there in that particular thing. So there is some other methods of calibration that we can know separately, and reading meter value multiplied by certain factor gives us the concrete strength. So this reading meter, particular reading meter is there, or this indicator is there. So this meter actually gives us certain value. So this thing, when multiplied by certain factor will give us the actual compressive strength of that particular specimen. Now the thing is that this method is vague, as the plunger pressed against mortar and aggregate gives different values. So this is also very important. This method is considered vague as the method as this plunger pressed against this particular mortar or this aggregate actually gives us different values, because this thing is very much dependent upon the homogeneity of concrete. But in real life we actually don't get 100% homogeneous concrete. That it's not like that we will get totally homogeneous and all the materials are distributed equally in that particular concrete specimen. It doesn't happen in real life scenario. So what happens actually, somewhere might be that the number of aggregates are more, or somewhere might be there was more amount of water, and maybe there is some amount of cavities have formed inside, or like somewhat like more amount of sand is there. So it is for sure that there won't be certain homogeneity of that particular specimen, and thus we will be getting some separate values for, when the plunger will be pressed against that particular thing, which is practically not true. So one might get confused that the strength cannot vary so largely between these two elements. Like in one part of the beam you are pressing it is giving a value of 20, and other part you are pressing it is giving a value of 10. So that will create some certain confusion. So this test is considered vague. Next is the ultrasonic pulse velocity test, or the UPV test. In short we say it UPV. And ultrasonic pulse is allowed to pass through the concrete with emitter receiver system. So for your knowledge, I'll just tell you that ultrasonic pulses or ultrasonic sounds are those particular sound or those particular pitch, you can say, those particular waves which are beyond our hearing limit, which is 20,000 Hertz or 20 kilohertz. So we send certain ultrasonic pulses which is allowed to pass through that concrete specimen, and there is an emitter receiver system. Like one emitter is placed on one end, as you can see in this particular diagram. This particular diagram is showing that one this person is pressing the emitter and receiver against this particular specimen, and on one side where the emitter is there, this emitter will emit some ultrasonic pulse, and this ultrasonic pulse will be detected on the other hand by that particular receiver. So there will be certain amount of time taken by this particular pulse, and if we have the knowledge of what amount of velocity this particular pulse is having, so we can thus get an idea about how good or how good quality this concrete is there. So the less time means dense concrete, and hence the quality is good. So just note one thing, that if the time taken is very less, then we can say that this concrete is very dense and is of good quality. So as you know that sound travels very faster in solid materials as compared to liquid or gaseous materials. So if by chance in any cracks or any cavities are there present in that particular specimen, so presence of that cavity or that crack won't actually allow the velocity to pass properly as it does in the homogeneous concrete specimen, in where you get completely the concrete material. There actually the speed will be very high if the concrete is dense, and thus it will pass a good amount of velocity. And then if certain crack or crevices or any cavity is there, so that velocity will largely be affected. So that thing can be noted down, and hence we can get an idea if there is any crack or any fault is there inside that particular specimen. So it is used to detect cracks in RCC structure. So these are two different tests, that is the UPV test and the rebound hammer test, which we can use on a finished beam or a finished structure without actually destroying it. So these are known as the non-destructive tests. So now, to make certain concrete, we need to know about the concrete mix design and the process what the process or the actual steps which we will be applying to know about that particular mix ratio, and to calculate that particular mix ratio and use it in our real life or the practical scenarios or in the fields. So the requirements are the grade designation giving the characteristic strength requirement of concrete. The first requirement is that the grade should be designated properly, that we must be sure what type of grade we need according to our uses. Suppose in a certain condition we need a good quality concrete and it should be somewhat around M30 or M40, so we must fix that this must be our grade, this is M30, and designating that particular grade, by knowing that particular grade, we must actually go forward for our further calculation of the proportions of the different materials. So first important thing is the grade designation. Next is the type of cement influences the rate of development of compressive strength of concrete. So actually as you know, there are various type of cements like the PPC, OPC, and even OPC has various grades, or even there are many other types of cements which you can know in the building material subject. So this type of cements, the various type of cements actually provide various type of influences on the particular concrete which we are making. So we need to be sure about the type of cement which we are using. So next important criteria is the type of cement that we are using. Next requirement is the maximum nominal size of aggregates to be used in the concrete. Next idea should be of this particular about the aggregates. The maximum nominal size which we are using to be used in concrete may be as large as possible within the limits prescribed by IS 456. So we don't try to take very small aggregates, we take somewhat larger aggregates, and also there is certain limit that beyond this size we won't take any aggregate. So, and all these things are prescribed by IS 456. The cement content is to be limited from the shrinkage, cracking, and the creep. So the cement content is to be limited by these three factors. These three factors will very much influence the cement content, and knowing the amount of shrinkage or the cracking or the creep that these three properties that particular cement can possess. So knowing that, we will actually limit our cement content according to that. Next is the workability of the concrete. This again is the important factor. This workability of concrete is an important factor, and for satisfactory placing and compaction is related to the size and shape of the section, quantity and spacing of the reinforcement, and technique used for transportation, placing and compaction. So there are various reasons why we actually need to know about the workability of this concrete, and thus more we know about the workability of that concrete, the more we get the idea about with how much ease we can work with that particular concrete. So knowing the workability of concrete is very essential. So performing any kind of design, mixed design, if you are going to calculate any design mix ratio, it is therefore advisable to first once conduct at least one type of workability test, be it like slump cone test or the compacting factor test or VB test or flow test. Any one of the workability tests should be done so as to confirm what amount of workability this particular concrete grade will be showing. Just by getting a rough idea of the ratios, we will make that particular concrete, we will try to get the workability, and then we will redesign or refix the values, and we will come to the fixed and the final design mix ratio of that particular grade of concrete which we are supposed to calculate. So next is the procedure. First is to determine the target mean strength Ft. Determine the target mean strength Ft from the specified characteristic compressive strength at 28 days FCK. So we know the 28 days FCK and the level of quality control, and we can calculate the target mean strength by using this particular formula. Ft equal to FCK plus 1.65 S, where S is the standard deviation. S is the standard deviation obtained from the table of approximate contents given after the design mix, and this is there to give you a particular idea about the specific about the standard deviation of different mix of concrete. Next is to obtain the water cement ratio. Next we need to obtain the water cement ratio for the desired mean target strength. So once we know about the grade, next our job is to know the relation between the water content and the cement content. So this can only be done by doing some thing like this should be an empirical relationship between the compressive strength and the water cement ratio. So chosen is checked against the limiting water cement ratio. So for the desired mean target, using the empirical relationship between the compressive strength and the water cement ratio, which is actually there in the code, so chosen is checked against the limiting water cement ratio. So we will check against the limiting water cement ratio, and we will do some particular trial and error so that we can limit the water cement ratio up to a certain extent. The water cement ratio so chosen is checked against the limiting water cement ratio for the requirements of durability given in the table and adopts the lower of the two values. So we will actually take the lower value of the water to cement ratio. So lower the water to cement ratio, the less will be the amount of water that will be used in our particular concrete. Next is estimate the amount of entrapped air for maximum nominal size for the aggregate from the table. So we will try to estimate the amount of entrapped air. And next is select the water content for the required workability and maximum size of aggregates for aggregates in saturated dry condition from the table. So from the table again we will get the idea about the maximum size of the aggregates and also the amount of water content which can be taken and satisfying the favorable conditions. And this table is again there in that IS code, that is IS 10262 2009. And determine the percentage of fine aggregate and total aggregate by absolute volume from table for concrete using crushed coarse aggregate. So also we will determine the percentage of fine aggregate and the total aggregate by this absolute volume from the table. Next is adjust the values of water content and percentage of sand so provided in the table for any difference in workability. So we are next going to adjust this particular water content and percentage of sand and provide the table provided in the table for any difference in workability or water cement ratio or the grading of the fine aggregate and for round aggregate of the values given in the table. Calculate the cement content from the water cement ratio and the final water content as arrived after the adjustment. And then after the adjustment we will calculate the final cement content from the water cement ratio and the final water content. Check the cement against the minimum cement content from the requirements of the durability and the greater of the two values is adopted. So next we will check the cement against the minimum cement content from the requirements of the durability, and the greater of the two values will be adopted for our job. Next, from the quantities of water and cement per unit volume of concrete and the percentage of sand already determined in steps 6 and 7. In step 6 and 7, what we have determined, that is the quantities of water and the cement per unit volume of concrete and the percentage of the sand already, which we have determined in step 6 and 7. Next we will calculate the content of coarse and fine aggregates per unit volume of concrete from the relation given below. So this relation will be used to actually get the content of coarse and fine aggregates per unit volume, where V is our absorbed volume of concrete, which is equal to gross volume 1 meter cube minus the volume of the entrapped air. So we will also consider this. We will take a 1 meter cube sample, we will calculate for that, and we will minus the we will subtract the amount of air content or the amount of entrapped air which we will try to estimate, and then we will use this formula where SC is the specific gravity of cement, SC is the specific gravity of cement, W is the mass of water per cubic meter of concrete in kg, W is the mass of water, C is, again you can know that it is the mass of cement per cubic meter of concrete in kgs, P is the ratio of fine aggregate to total aggregate by absolute volume, Fa and Ca are the total masses of fine aggregates and coarse aggregates per cubic meter of concrete respectively in kgs, and SFA, SCA is equal to specific gravity of saturated, surface dry, fine and coarse aggregates respectively. Finally, we will determine the concrete mix proportion of the first trial mix. We will determine the concrete mix proportion of the first trial mix. So after that, we will prepare the concrete using the calculated proportion and cast 3 cubes of 150 mm size and test them. Wait after 28 days, moist curing, and check for the strength. Prepare the trial mixes with suitable adjustment till the final mix proportions are arrived at. So let us check this particular question. For the column of a building, the concrete shall be of M50 grade, coarse aggregate of average size 20 mm and 10 mm are given to us, and cement OPC of grade 43 along with little amount of plasticizer 1.2% of cement by weight was used. So these are the three things which were used. This is given to you to make this particular M50 concrete. So we are asked to design the mix ratio if specific gravity of cement is 3.15, fine aggregate is 2.61 for zone 2, and coarse aggregate is 2.65 for 20 mm and 2.66 for 10 mm, and minimum cement content as per contract shall be 400 kg per meter cube, and maximum water cement ratio as per contract to be taken as 0.45. So let us write the first step. first step is to calculate the target mean strength, and it is given by Ft equal to FCK plus Ks, or K is 1.65 times S. So now, as the grade is M50, in the theory we discussed that for concrete of grade M30 to M50 we will use S is equal to 5, and therefore our FT is equal to FCK is asked to be 50 plus 1.65 times S is 5, and it is equal to 58.25 megapascals. Next, second step is selection of water to cement ratio, and for that we assume 0.35 as water to cement ratio. It is totally upon our assumption to be 0.35. So now, calculation of water content. Third step is calculation of water content, and it is for approximate 20 mm max size of aggregate, which is 180 kg per meter cube as per table number 5 of IS 10262. So if you check the table number 5 of IS 10262, for the 20 mm max size of aggregate we use water content as approximate water content as 180 kg per meter cube. So as the plasticizer is proposed, we can reduce the water content by 20%. So for plasticizer we will reduce it by 20%. So we can assume that the water content is therefore 0.8, or that is 80% of the total. So 0.8 times 180, which is equal to 144 kg per meter cube. So this was our water content, that is 144 kg per meter cube. In the fourth step, we will calculate the calculation of cement content. So cement content will be calculated. Now as we know that water to cement ratio is 0.35 and water content per meter cube of concrete is 144 kg per meter cube. Per meter cube we know it's 144 kg, and now therefore the cement content will be cement content. So as this is water to cement ratio, which is 0.35, water content we know, therefore if I divide this with this one, we will get the cement content. So that is equal to 144 divided by 0.35, and it is equal to 411.4 kg of cement we will be having, and it is per meter cube. So now we can let us say that it is 412 kg per meter cube. We will just round this up to 412. So this is our approximate cement content. So now as per contract, you can check in the question. As per contract, the minimum cement content should be 400 kg per meter cube. Hence we will say that it is okay. This thing is okay. In the step number 5, We will now calculate the sand and coarse aggregate, or we will calculate calculation of FA and CA. So now we will calculate the amount of FA and CA in our design mix. So for that, the volume of cement, so let us consider that volume of concrete is equal to 1 meter cube, and so the volume of cement will be equal to 412 upon 3.15 times 1000. So 3.15 is our density of the cement and the specific gravity of the cement multiplied by 1000, and 412 divided by that particular, that is the density of the cement, will give us the volume of the cement. So this is the mass of the cement we have, 412 in that 1 meter cube of concrete, and by dividing that with the density, that is 3.15 times 1000, will give us the volume of the cement, which is 0.1308 meter cube. This is our volume of cement. Similarly, the volume of water will be equal to, water, as you know, it's 144 kg per meter cube. So it is 144 divided by 1 times 1000. As you know, specific gravity of water is 1. So the amount of water is equal to 0.1440 meter cube. This is our volume of water. So volume of admixture will be equal to, so 4994 is our 994 will be our this volume of admixture, that the mass of admixture, because it is said that it is 1.2% by weight of cement. So this is our admixture. So 1.2% of 412 will be somewhat around 4.994, and that divided by the density of the admixture is 1.145 times 1000, and it is equal to 0.0043 meter cube. So this is the volume of admixture which we are going to use. In the next step, this step is continuing. So now the total weight of the materials except the coarse aggregate will be equal to, so total volume, so it's not total weight, actually it's total volume excluding coarse aggregate will be equal to, CA means coarse aggregate, it will be equal to 0.1308 plus 0.1440 plus 0.043, and it is equal to 0.2791 meter cube. So this is the our amount of this other materials excluding this coarse aggregate. So the volume of coarse and fine aggregate will be, excluding all aggregates, it is 0.2791. So therefore volume of Ca plus Fa is equal to 1 minus 0.2791, which is equal to 0.7209 meter cube. So this is our volume of coarse aggregate and fine aggregate. So as 1 meter cube is the total volume, just subtracting the other materials volume, we will get the total volume of the coarse and the fine aggregate. So now volume of fine aggregate will be will be, as it is 1/3 of the total volume of 1/3 is that much of, assuming that let us say 33% of the total volume of aggregate will be taken by this fine aggregate. So it is 1/3 times 0.7209 is equal to 2.379 meter cube. I will write here, assuming 33% of fine aggregate out of total aggregate. So this is the amount of fine aggregate which we are getting. So now therefore the volume of Ca will be equal to 0.7209, sorry, this is 0.2379. So it is 0.7209 minus 0.2379, and it is equal to 0.4830 meter cube. So this is our volume of coarse aggregate, 0.4830 meter cube. Therefore the weight of fine aggregate will be equal to the volume multiplied by the density, that is 0.2379 multiplied by 2.61, which is our specific gravity, multiplied by 1000, and it is equal to 620.919 kg per meter cube. So now say let us take it as approx 621 kg per meter cube. So this is our approximate weight of fine aggregate per meter cube. So similarly for Ca, we can calculate it to be around 1284 kg per meter cube, just by the similar process. As you know, the volume is 0.4830. We will multiply the specific gravity times 1000, that is the density, and we will multiply, while by multiplying the density with the volume we will get the weight, that is 1284 kg, and it is per meter cube, as we are considering 1 meter cube of concrete. So now one more thing, we are given in the question that 20 mm and 10 mm are the two sizes of aggregates. So considering 20 mm, is to 10 mm as 0.55 is to 0.45. Let us consider that this is the ratio of these two aggregates, amount of aggregates we are considering this, and therefore 20 mm is equal to 706 kg. So 706 kg will be taken by 20 mm, and 10 mm will take 578 kg. So out of this 1284 kg per meter cube, suppose this is 1284 kgs, 706 kgs will be taken up by the 20 mm aggregates, and 578 kgs will be taken up by this 10 mm aggregates. And now let us do one thing. All these mixed details are per meter cube, and now let's increase cement, water admixture by 2.5% for trial 1. So what we will do, we will increase the amount of cement, water and admixture by 2.5%. So we will get cement equal to 412 multiplied by 1.025, and it is giving 422 kgs. Similarly water will be 144 multiplied by 1.025 and it will give 147.6 kgs. So fine aggregate we know 6 to 1 kgs and coarse aggregate we know 706 and 578 kgs. Cement is 422 kg and water is 147.6 kgs. At admixture, if we are taking 1.2% by weight of cement, so again 1.2% of this is equal to admixture is 1.2% of cement and it is equal to 1.2% of 422 kg will be 5.064 kgs. So it is 5.064 kgs. So now I have admixture 5.064 kgs. I have aggregates as suppose I'll take 1284 kgs and also cement as 422 kgs and water as 147.6 kgs and fine aggregate is 621 kgs. So let's make a proportion of this. So I can write here, let's write it here only. Water is to cement is to Fa is to Ca is equal to, so water we know it is 147.6 is to cement is 422 kgs is to fine aggregate is, so fine aggregate is 621 kgs and the coarse aggregate is 1284 kgs. So let's divide all of them by 422, the weight of cement. So the final, our ratio will be, design mix ratio will come out to be like 0.35 is to 1 is to 1.472 is to 3.043. So 0.35 was our water to cement ratio we know, and this 1 is to 1.472 is to 3.043 is our design mix ratio for this particular grade of concrete. So in this next question we are asked to calculate the standard deviation and 10 samples are given and corresponding for each sample 3 cubes have been used and their readings are given for the compressive strength. So we are asked to standard deviation for this particular given data, and what I have done, I have arranged this data somewhat in this fashion, like what are given in the question as rows, I have given them as the column headings. So I have sample numbers here, the cubes 1, 2 and 3 arranged in this manner. So I have added 3 more tables. First the fourth table says that it is the compressive strength of the sample xi. So it is actually here I will get the average of all the readings taken in sets of 3. So here suppose I have 20.5, 24 and 22.5. I will write the average of these 3 over here, and similarly I will do this for the next 10 samples. I will take the average of the 3 cubes in each sample over it. So it will be like, for the first one it will be 22.3, for second one it is 20, third one it is 20.5, fourth it is 22.2, for the fifth one it is 20.5, for the sixth is 23, seventh is again 23, eighth is 20, ninth is 15.3 and the 10th is 15. So this is the average of the 3 cubes of each samples. So this is our xi value. The fifth column says x bar minus xi. So to get the xi, that is the mean of this 10, what we will do, I will take the mean of this particular 10 values, that is the 10 averages which I have got by calculating this, and I will take further average of this all these 10 values, and it is coming as 20.2. It is simple, just adding these 10 values and dividing it with 10. So it will give me 20.2, and it is equal to our xi. So xi value is equal to 20.2. So now x bar will be xi minus, so this next column will be x bar minus xi. So x bar are these individual values, that is the average, and xi is the average of all these totals. So it will be these values can either be positive or negative. Let's see what happens. So in first case, x bar is 22.3, sorry, just one mistake. X bar is equal to 20.2. This is our x bar, and these are our individual xi's. So x bar is the average of all these 10 values, and xi is our average of the 3 cubes for each sample, and x bar is the average of all these 10 samples. So this is somewhat x bar minus xi. This will be the x bar value, that is 20.2, minus xi, that is the individual averages of this every sample. So it will be x bar minus xi for the first one will be 20.2 minus 22.3. So it will be minus 2.1. So it is 20.2 minus 22.3, it will be minus 2.1. Next will be 0.2. Next, third one is minus 0.3. Fourth one is minus 2. Fifth one is minus 0.3. Sixth one is minus 2.8. Seventh one minus 2.8. Eighth one is 0.2. Ninth one is 4.9, and 10th one is finally 5.2. So now taking the average of this one, so I don't think I need to take the average of this. I'll take the summation of this last column which I will be getting, and this is the square of this value simply. So x bar minus xi whole square is the square of these values. So minus 2.1, its square will be 4.41. So on squaring this, we will actually be getting all values in positive. So 0.2 will be 0.04, 0.3 will be equal to 0.09, minus 2 will be equal to 4, minus 0.3 will be equal to 0.09, minus 2.8 will be equal to 7.84, again minus 2.8 square will be equal to 7.84, 0.2 square will be equal to 0.04, 4.9 square will be equal to 24.04, and 5.2 square will be equal to 27.04. So now taking the summation of this, the summation will be equal to somewhat around 75.4. So 75.4 is my summation of x bar minus xi square. So here I can write that summation of x bar minus xi whole square will be equal to 75.4. Okay, and now to get the standard deviation, the formula for standard deviation, and it is given by S, and it is equal to square root of summation of x bar minus xi whole square divided by n minus 1. N, as you know, is equal to 10. 10 samples are there, so therefore our S is equal to square root of 75.4 minus upon 10 minus 1. 75.4 upon 10 minus 1, and it is equal to 2.85. So this is our answer. So I hope these two questions were very good enough to give you an idea about the concrete mix design, to how to calculate the mix design ratios, and also the second question was very good for calculating the standard deviation. So it will the second question will give us an idea as to how to do the get the value of the standard deviation in case we are doing sampling of various number of cubes. So one thing, these problems are actually very simple. Only for the design mix ratios we just need to be sure so as to how much how good we are in doing the assumptions. Just like that, we did the assumption for the water to cement ratio as 0.35 in the problem related to that concrete mix design. So why I have opened this particular table in front of you, which we had already discussed earlier in the previous video. So this table actually was used for showing us that according to what exposure condition and what is the type of condition to which a concrete is exposed to get a good durability, what should be the minimum grade of concrete or the minimum nominal cover, maximum water to cement ratio, the minimum cement content, what should be used. So now why I have opened this one. So see, you can see one trend, one relationship between the grade of concrete, and the water to cement ratio. In the first one, if M20 is the grade of concrete, 0.55 is the water to cement ratio which is taken, or it is, you can say it is suggested that you use 0.55 for M20. Next, if I am increasing the grade of concrete from M20 to M25, our water to cement ratio somewhat decreases and it becomes 0.5. If it is M30, the water to cement is again 0.45, it is somewhat decreased more. Again, if I am increasing the grade of concrete to M35, it is 0.45, it does remain same, but in case of M40, it again reduces to 0.4. So you can see one trend is getting developed, that with the increase of grade of concrete, the water to cement ratio is actually reducing. So it is said that the amount of water should be reduced in comparison to the cement, or you can say that the amount of cement should be increased in comparison to the water which we are using in that particular concrete. So now, if you are very much well aware with this particular table and what grade of concrete is using what amount of water to cement ratio, so as we had M50 in that particular question, so I had assumed one value which is actually higher than this 0.4. So you can see that for M40 it is 0.4, it is suggested to be 0.4 for M40. So in our question the grade of concrete was asked to be M50, so I took a water to cement ratio which is actually higher, that is which is actually lower, that is 0.35. Next now move on to the next part of our discussion, that is our reinforcement. So it is where our actual course of RCC begins. Yeah, previously we needed to know about the cement concrete, the type of cement concretes which we are actually using for our this particular RCCs. So now actually RCC means reinforced cement concrete. So therefore some reinforcement shall be there in our cement concrete, which is actually used to give some tensile strength to this particular concrete. Also it is good for giving a resistance to the flexure. And again, if you are putting reinforcement for the shear, that is known as the tie bars, which we will be reading in our next chapters, so that this there is a good use of this reinforcement in our cement concrete, which thus gives us gives the cement concrete strengths at different levels from different point of views. So now, speaking about the reinforcement, any material that can take tension may be used as reinforcement. So any material which takes tension shall be used as reinforcement. So by this particular sentence you are getting the idea what is the job of a reinforcement in our cement concrete or in our RCC. So this reinforcement actually takes up the tension part. So just if you consider one diagram of a beam, singly reinforced beam, suppose, where reinforcement is put in one side only. So it is seen that reinforcement is put in the bottom side and the top part is kept as it is as a normal concrete, because a beam actually bends somewhat like this, and on bending like this the lower bottom fiber will be stretched and the top fibers will be pressed towards each other. So we have a compressive force on the top fiber and a tensile force in the bottom fiber. So as you know that concrete is again weak in tension and strong in compression, so we don't bother what is happening in the top fiber. It is compressing, how much compressed it is getting, so we actually don't bother about that thing. But when it comes to the tension, we know that concrete is very weak in tension, and it is actually 1/10 of what amount of compressive strength it is able to take. So we have to either we have to design a concrete which is having a huge amount of compressive strength so that it can also counteract that much amount of tensile strength, or what we can do is to provide some certain reinforcement which will actually counteract this tension forces. So this reinforcement, the job of this particular reinforcement is to give the resistance to the tension forces that is being applied to a particular member or a particular concrete element. So for example, we use steel, aluminium, copper, plastic fiber, or even bamboo for this reinforcement thing. So one job of reinforcement thing is that it should give some good amount of elasticity. So if it puts a good amount of elasticity, so then only we are using this particular reinforcement. So suppose this steel, aluminium, copper, fiber, plastic fiber, or even bamboo, these materials somewhat have good amount of elasticity as compared to some brittle item like concrete. So as now steel is now most preferable out of this because of the following reasons. Steel is most preferable and it is mostly used in RCC structures because it is economical than other metals. So if you consider the other metals like aluminium, copper, plastic fiber, steel is actually somewhat economical, and more importantly it can provide a high tensile strength. It actually gives high tensile strength also if you compare it with other. Even if suppose if there is some other metal which provides maybe little bit of higher tensile strength than steel, it may not be correct that that particular metal will be as economical as our steel is. So this is one important criteria, because it is both economical and giving a high amount of tensile strength, and that is why we are taking steel. But above all, the most important reason why we are taking the steel is this one, the third point, which is the coefficient of thermal expansion is comparable to that of concrete. So in presence of heat, the amount to which the concrete will be expanding, that will be same for both steel and concrete. The steel is having equal amount of thermal expansion as compared to that of concrete. So even if there is some material which we have developed in such possible way, we have discovered one metal that which is very much economical as compared to steel, or even providing high tensile strength, if it is not able to provide one such thermal expansion which is one such coefficient of thermal expansion which is equal to that of concrete, then what will happen on expansion, on heat, if the particular concrete material is RCC material is exposed to some very high heated condition, suppose that concrete is increasing, and if in case that coefficient of thermal expansion for that particular metal is somewhat lesser than concrete, it won't show such expansion. So as a result, there is a chance that that particular reinforcement may somehow distort itself or move its position from where it was kept or where it was designed to be present. Also, if suppose the thermal expansion of that particular metal is higher, so it might be happen that it will expand more as compared to the concrete, and it will protrude itself outside of the concrete, and it will be falling outside the concrete, and it may also damage that particular RCC member. So it is therefore very important so that we have a coefficient of thermal expansion of that particular reinforcement metal quite comparable to that of concrete, which our steel provides us. So these are the 3 points why we should take steel as the most preferable reinforcement material. So now this reinforcing bars, which we actually use in our commercial purposes in our different sites or different projects, these are provided in different sizes, and these are the diameters which are listed. So we actually, whenever we are going to purchase some amount of steel bars for our reinforcement, we are given them in some dias like 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, and note that all of these are in mm. In the second column, I have represented the actual area, that is by simple area of a particular circle as the diameter of these bars are given to us, and these bars are expected to be cylindrical and the cross section is thus circular. So the area will be given simply by pi by 4 times d square, that is the diameter square. So the actual areas are somewhat calculated to be this, but approx area is somewhat like this, and though they are not very close to the actual values, but this can give you an idea so as to memorize these areas of this particular dia bars quickly, so that you can quickly memorize the values of this dias, or you can even take this 6 mm dia bar as 20 or 25 if you are not satisfied with this 30, as the actual area is 20.27. But for the other ones, you see the areas are quite comparable: 50.26, 50, 78.4, 75, 113.09, 110, 201.06, 200, 314.15, 314, or you can say it as 100 pi, as you wish. So this way it is done so as to make it easy to be remembered. And all these areas, both actual and approx areas, are represented in millimeter square. So next, there is one question: provide 20 mm and 12 mm dia bars for steel of area 1385 mm square. So I will just tell you one thing: just pause the video and try to memorize most of the values if you can. Just give it a try to memorize most of the values. And secondly, now if you have this question, this provide 20 mm and 12 mm dia bars for steel area 1385 mm square. So now you know the areas of this particular dia bars, and particular bars, you know the areas with the certain dias given, and one area is area of steel, total area of steel, suppose 1385 mm square is given to us in a particular question, and you are asked to provide only 20 mm and 12 mm dia bars. I will just say you to pause the video right here, and without looking at the solution, I know the notes are provided in the link for the notes are provided in the description. You can go and check it, but just to give your brain a boost regarding this thing, just try to solve this thing just by pausing the video. Just pause the video and try to get what number of bars you are getting, and please post your answer in the comment section. So now this solution is done in two ways. If I am able to use 420 dia bars and 112 dia bars, so for 420 dia bars our area will be 4 times 314, which will be around 1256, and 112 dia bar for the area of 12 dia bar is 110. So 1256 plus 110 will give us 1356, and which is very close to 1385 mm square. And try to provide one area which is either less or either equal to or just less than the area given in the question. Not very less, but also just less or equal to it, and don't try to provide a value which is very high to this particular steel. So these are the two possible ways. First is this one, second is the 320 dia bars and 412 dia bars, and if you calculate their individual areas and sum it up, you will get around somewhere around 1385 mm square. I just don't exactly remember the values which I had calculated, but it will be somewhat closer. And you being the designer, you can provide any kind of dia bars as you want, any kind of bars as you want of any dia. So it was asked in the question to provide only 20 and 12 mm dia bars. So you just try to do one thing, you try to solve this thing for different bars of different dia, and please write your answer in the comment section, and try to use not more than 10 bars in your combination. Similarly, there's one more question, what will be the dia of the bars if 3 bars are allowed for AST 1450 mm square, and also provide them. So you can also try this one. The solution is in front of you. So next is the grade of steel, and this grade of steel is somewhat represented by this way. This is Fe 250, like Fe 415, Fe 500, Fe 500D, Fe 550, Fe 600. Fe stands for iron. So I have represented it with hashtag. The number alongside Fe represents the yield stress of the steel. That is, the number which is alongside this Fe, that is Fe 250, Fe 420, this 250, 415, 500 things, these actually tell us the yield stress of that particular steel. And the D in the Fe 500D represents ductility. So you can say that Fe 500D is a very ductile bar. And one more thing, Fe 250, which is marked with one asterisk, is actually mild steel. 415 and 500 are marked with 2 asterisks, and this is HYSD. And similarly 500D, 550 and 600 are HYSD with recent development. So these bars are actually developed recently. Next is the type of steel. So the types of steel are the mild steel, HYSD, that is the high yield strength deformed, and finally is the thermomechanically treated bars, that is the TMT bars. So these are the 3 types of steels that are used commercially for the various projects in various sites. And before we actually go on to that one, let me discuss with you the stress strain diagram of a particular steel, because previously in concrete we had seen that the graph was somewhat parabolic, and at certain stage the concrete was showing some good amount of brittleness, the concrete was breaking down. But for the steel you can see that the stress will keep on the strain will keep on increasing with the increasing stress, and at certain point it will give a certain yield, and this graph will go downwards to this point D. Suppose to this point D. What is this point D? Or let us say that CD is the yield plateau. So first part, that is the OA is the linear range of our stress strain curve. A is the proportional limit, and AB is the first non-linear portion of this graph. So it is where the stress is not directly proportional to strain, it is somehow goes towards being yielded. And yielded means it is like it is somewhat its breakage starts. You can say that its deformation somewhat starts for that particular steel. Next is AB is the first non-linear part. AB is, as you know, is the first non-linear part, and B is the elastic limit. And B is that limit up to which the elasticity will be shown, and it is known as the yield stress. That amount of stress which is applied to reach up to the elastic limit is known as the yield stress. B is the elastic limit, and this is our yield stress. C dash is the upper yield point, that is the peak of curve BC. So the peak of curve BC is C and it is known as the upper yield point C dash, and C is the lower yield point. So there's one peak will be there between BC and it will be the known as the C dash, and it is the upper yield point. And whenever this graph is going down, the capital C will denote us the lower yield point. Next we have CD. As you know, it is the yield plateau, and though in this graph this yield plateau is somewhat shown that it is going downward, most cases it is a straight line for a very small duration of time. For a small period it will show a straight line when we are actually doing this stress strain analysis on a particular steel. And DE is the strain hardening. So now after we have received this amount of strain in this particular steel member, so now it will again actually harden, or you can see that it will be able to take somehow more amount of stress than the yield stress, and this part is said as the strain hardening. Like some strain has been formed in the particular steel, but till now it is able to take some more amount of stress until the ultimate point, that is E, which is known as the ultimate stress. This maximum amount of stress is known as the ultimate stress, and this is the maximum amount of stress a steel member can take. F is finally the fracture point. Like beyond this the rupture happens, the steel won't be able to take any strength, and there will be a large increase of the strain, and you can say that that particular steel member is broken or it's failed. So now this dotted line represents a true stress strain diagram, so which was actually expected for this particular steel, but it does not happen. It somehow bends down and reaches to the point F, which is the rupture strength, and it is the stress at the failure, that amount of stress when the failure will take place. Next, this graph was about the mild steel. Next is the HYSD or CTD or TOR. So what are these particular terms? HYSD represents the high yield strength deformed bars. So these bars are actually somehow deformed. Why they are made? They are purposely deformed during the time of construction, and also these are seen to give us high yield strength. So this gives us a high yield strength, and that's why for HYSD bars the yield strength is somewhat higher, see 415 and 500, but for mild steel it was only 250. So now HYSD stands for high yield strength deformed, and CTD stands for cold twisted deformed, and TOR is actually a name of a company. So now it is obtained by straining the mild steel beyond yield plateau by stretching and twisting at particular temperature, and after that the unloading is done. So now it is just actually first stretched and twisted beyond the yield plateau. This particular strain is given to it and at particular temperature, and after that the unloading is done, and above the process of straining eliminates the yield plateau from the stress strain diagram, and thus this process actually eliminates our yield plateau from our stress strain diagram. So we won't achieve this type of thing in our curve. We will achieve only one peak, and this is our graph as shown for the HYSD bars. So you can see the Fe250 or the mild steel graph is somewhat here, this one, but for Fe500 and 415 the yield strength is actually very much higher. Above the process of straining eliminates the yield plateau from the stress strain diagram, and this eliminates the yield plateau. See, we don't have the yield plateau, just we have in Fe250 for this particular Fe500 and Fe415. HYSD steel is less ductile than the mild steel. As you can see, this graph is extending and it is showing a huge amount of strain before the fracture happens, but the same is not true for Fe 400 and 415 and Fe 500, and for 500 it is actually very less. In absence of definite yield point, 0.2% of proof stress is considered as yield stress. So we consider 0.2% of proof stress for this particular yield stress. So regarding proof stress, you can search the internet what is its definition. Finally is the thermomechanically treated bars, and this is somewhat the diagram of this cross section of a TMT bar, which is commercially known as the TMT bars, which is mostly used in most of the construction nowadays. And these bars are made by applying thermal and mechanical process simultaneously on steel. So for these bars we actually apply thermal and mechanical process simultaneously for obtaining this bar. This combination, and therefore this name is suggested, it is thermomechanically treated bars. This combination process makes the steel relatively more corrosion resistant, and thus it makes the steel corrosion resistant, and TMT bars are relatively more ductile than HYSD. They are more ductile than HYSD. So previously that for Fe 250 we had one problem, that we could get a strength up to 250 only for this yield strength for this particular Fe 250 mild steel. So to eliminate that, we introduced HYSD, and thus we are getting up to 415 or 500. Now it was seen that these particular HYSD bars were not having ductility. They were less ductile than mild steel. So now we introduced this TMT bars, which has further eliminated this problem of ductility, and thus HYSD, these TMT bars are much more ductile as compared to HYSD. TMT bars have all relevant features of HYSD, and they have all relevant features of HYSD. You can say that it is providing almost the same amount of strength, and it is available as Fe 415 and Fe 500 only. So this is the cross section. You can see that there is one inner core, which is the inner soft layer for ductility. This gives the ductility. This inner layer core gives us the ductility, and it's a soft layer. The middle layer is the transition, and it is a very hard layer, and it gives us the strength. And last one is the outer corrosion resistant layer, and it is our rim, and it is provided for corrosion resistance, and these two are the ribs which gives a good amount of anchorage with the cement concrete to which this reinforcement is being applied. Now note one thing, as carbon percentage increases, the strength increases and ductility decreases. So this one experimental thing has been found out, that as you increase the carbon content, carbon percentage is increased, the strength also increases, but the ductility is reduced. As you know that carbon, or the materials which are made up of carbon, allotropes or anything you can say, are actually ductile. So increase of carbon reduces the ductility and also increases the strength. So this was all about the basic concepts of RCC, and this is the third and the final part of this particular video lesson regarding the basic concepts on RCC. In the next video we will be starting about the limit state design of concrete, and this is one method for the design of concrete and design of RCC, sorry, and it is where our actual design part begins. This was the basic introduction about the RCC, and please, I would request that if you are having any kinds of doubt, please post it in the comment section. Also you try to post your answers which you were getting for that particular diabar questions, and not only that, please try to like and share my video, and please subscribe to this channel. It is well requested to you, because this thing takes a lot of hard work. So what you just need to do is to just follow up my page and follow up my YouTube channel, and just to subscribe this button. You have to just press that red button and you are subscribed to this channel, and just by increase of number of subscribers I do get some motivation, and thus I can also bring some good videos to you. So it's well requested to you, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.